Hello, Peter Hewitt, La Artistino here. A little while ago I asked some of you who'd be interested in seeing some of my private work, particularly the work that I do in my art journals, and I got a rather positive response from a lot of people saying that would be interested. So here today I've gathered some of my art journals that I've been working on over the past year and a bit, and I'll show you exactly what I do when I'm not doing colouring books. I'll start with this one. This is a Protex visual art diary. It's Australian made. I bought it for about $5 at a local shop. It's quite nice. It's all cartridge paper and just a soft binding and a cardboard back. This is the one I'm currently working with. I usually use it for sketching, knotting out ideas and testing new art materials in. But I like to christen these books with a nice picture on the front. So my first picture, I don't know if you recognise this young lady with a beard, but if you read Terry Pratchett you might be familiar with Sergeant Cheery Littlebottom from the Night Watch series, and I've done her with Inktense pencils. What I've done is I've sketched her out using a brown Inktense pencil. It's a bit of a departure from starting with a graphite pencil, which a lot of artists like to do, but I wanted to avoid it having hard lines, so I used the Inktense to sketch her out. I coloured in her face with a combination of Inktense pencils and also with Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer watercolour pencils, because you can't really get the light skin tones with the Inktense pencils. So, and as you can see, this paper, it's only cartridge paper, so it ripples a little bit, but I love using Inktense pencils for my rough sketching as well. They help me throw colour down and develop ideas. Next in this book you'll see where I design and work on pieces that are going to be much more developed pieces. This is where I do my rough sketches. You'll see this little person pop up again in one of my art journals in a little while. This one I was working on a platypus done in sort of a Kuri design. There you go, and here's another example of how I use Inktense pencils to throw a sketch down and then put some water on it using my aqua brush to bring out the Inktense pencils and give it some texture and colour. On this side, now here's an example of how I go about researching pictures. Up the top here I've drawn a chicken's head right from memory, or just without looking at any reference material, and as you can see it's pretty rubbish. Then I start pulling up photographs of chickens and I end up with something that looks much more like a chicken. So after a couple of pencil sketches I started drawing them with my Inktense pencils and then activating them. The Inktense pencils again are a really quick way for me to create a colour sketch that I can work on. So I've done a lot of chickens here, and there's chickens over the next couple of pages because I was working on a design for a picture. So here I'm developing different chicken heads, experimenting with poses, and there's a front view, and I really like this one. I'll probably use this particular chicken in a picture at a later date. Going for something a little bit more cartoony, putting eyelashes on it. Don't know why I did that. Sometimes I just do things and I figure out later why I've done them. More chickens! Yeah, I've even stuck a photograph, a printout of a chicken in there. Yeah, I haven't actually progressed to doing this as a fully finished piece yet. Sometimes I just like to experiment and see what I come up with. Yeah, some loose experimental drawings for a kind of an alien looking girl, very cartoony. It's a colour sketch of what she might look like. Again, these are just very loose, very fast. Here I was playing around with rubbing in some pastels, you know, like I've shown you in the video of doing pastel backgrounds. Well, I'm using it in here and seeing if I can use the Inktense pencils over the top, and I thought that looked quite nice. It's a little side story that I do. You'll see this character pop up in another video when I discuss some of my past work. Here is another sketch that I was working on for a finished piece. Oh, you recognise that if you've seen my past tutorial on doing the wood grain. I used this book for it. And more experiments. These are with watercolours and putting pencil over the top of watercolours. I think I used polychromos pencils to do this, to see how bright I could get the colours when I pop them over a watercolour background. Here is some pencil sets just having a quick look at the different colours that I get in them. So I think that was the cheap set from Kmart. It doesn't do too badly as a basic sort of cheap pencil set with this nice sort of slightly textured cartridge paper. It certainly does better on here than it does in any colouring books. Trying out my Derwent Colour Softs. You might recognise that one from another tutorial, and I think that's just about all I've got in here. Put that one to one side. Now this is a little Quill spiral bound book. I bought it because I like how thick the spirals are here, so when I throw other different mediums in and the paper starts to swell and buckle, it's still not going to bulge, it's still going to lie flat. And this one is marketed in Australia by Quill, but I think it might be manufactured in China. And again, it's just cartridge paper, and this is just really a lot of experiments. I use this book really to just experiment with different art materials and basically play. If I have an idea and I just want to express it but I don't want to make a fully completed picture, I use this book, and it's just a little book. It's a lot of fun. Here I've just cut out a picture from another book and stuck it in. I played around with these. I think these paints here came in a sample pack from a company, and I just wanted to see what they did, so I threw it on there. I gave this book the title, The Book of Disorderly Constructs, because that basically sums up what it is. Next page, I just stuck a sticker on there and surrounded it with fluorescent pens. Again, as I said, this book is really just playing around. I think it's fun if you're starting to experiment, or even if you're well acquainted with other types of art equipment, that you have something like this, that you're just mucking around. It's not for anybody, it's just for yourself to play with and see what you can do and what your art equipment can do. Here, very important note to self, not everything has to be perfect. In fact, nothing does. A little reminder. That, again, I had some acrylic paints and I just scraped them on with the edge of a credit card, and once it had dried, I drew this little sketchy thing on it. Next, again, playing around with just some, I think they were some markers, and I think I used an Inktense pencil to go around and activated it, and then just a little fine liner. Again, mucking around, not really meaning to produce anything, just seeing what happens. This is my favourite flavour of Lindor Lindt chocolate balls. I think that was the lemon one, I think, that came out, but you can't seem to get it anymore, at least I can't. So I stuck the wrapper in there because I liked it. This, again, I sort of threw down a lot of new colours of acrylics paints that I'd bought, and I let it dry, and after a couple of weeks I thought it needed something else, so I drew this little bolt of lightning going through it. This would make a nice background for a picture in the front. That's usually what I would end up doing with something like this, if I was willing to develop it further. This is a little introspective ink piece that I did. Feeling a little bit solemn, I think, when I did that one. More playing around. All I did for this one is I traced around my hand, and then I just doodled all the way through it. And once I'd finished that, I grabbed some, I think they might have been Prismacolor pencils, and I just coloured around it to give it a background. This was a bit of fun as well. This is Inktense pencils. I just scribbled on there with I think it was a Sherbet Lemon Inktense pencil, and maybe, well, I'm not quite sure which green that was, but anyway, threw it all on, and then I spotted some bits of glue on here, and I threw glitter over the top and just made a little glittery pattern. Again, ideas for backgrounds that didn't involve actually drawing, but just playing with your supplies. And this, I had a cheap set of paints that are marketed by Mikador for students, which I kind of like to use. They're a bit chalky and they dry a bit opaque, but still fun. And I just sketched in some drawings with a waterproof fine liner, and then painted all over the top of it. Just a bit of fun. As I said, these are really loose, crazy drawings of mine. Again, playing with paints. Playing with paint dabbers. I don't know, you probably can't see that, but the green background is done with a shimmery paint that I was experimenting with. This was just, I think it's a piece of an old silk flower that was lying around that I just stuck in and made into a butterfly. Okay, more fun with just a gold marker here, Inktense pencils again, and a little love heart. I actually found that little love heart. I think my daughter drew it. I thought it was cool, so I stuck it in the center. Playing again with my different types of markers and with washi tape. If you don't know what washi tape, you can get it from craft stores. It's basically tape with patterns printed on them. A bit fun to use in multimedia work. In this one, I just threw some stuff on the background. Can't really remember the order I did this, but these are the top. This is just strips cut off from a piece of wrapping paper. Okay, here's another picture that I drew. Now let me think. I think I used the Inktense liner pencil, the one that isn't the pencil that dissolves in water, but you can use it and it won't dissolve if you go over the top with your Inktense pencils. And then I painted over the top with some cheap watercolors. Here was just a print that I had. I was spraying some spray ink on a stencil, and I had some left over on the stencil, so I just kind of like slapped it onto there to put the color down. Sometimes I use these little textured backgrounds and draw something over the top, and sometimes I just leave them. Here's a couple of other pieces I've done using Inktense pencils. Again, just introspective things, doodles, as you could say, like colour doodles. Okay, and here's some more Inktense drawings. I like using Inktense in this book. It's a nice way to get colour down quickly, lots of vibrancy. So I use a lot of Inktense way before I ever did colouring books with them. Here's another Inktense drawing. This time I kind of drew some, well, I didn't really draw anything. I just threw down some colour and some shapes in green, and once it had all dried I went over with a fine liner and I just picked out and doodled over everything. I used a fine liner and a white gel pen to add all the detail once the Inktense had dried. No plan at all when doing this picture, it just is what it is because it just happened the way it did. Okay, another little bit of an introspective piece. This one is another one I did with cheap watercolors. This one I just used a stencil for the background. I used some Faber-Castell gelatos just very roughly around the edges and rubbed it in with my fingertip, and I pasted in a picture that I had drawn with a water-based fine liner and then partially activated it with a brush loaded with water. This is another bit of a play around. I've cut some shapes out and stuck them in. More playing. This is nice. It's another stencil. It's got some more gelato around the outside of it. I haven't developed it any further. I just leave it the way it is. This one I used some watercolours again on a textured background that I'd applied previously to see what would happen. I kind of like the texture. This one I've gone over with some white gel ink to make the little splashy bits and the lines in the water. Again, more techniques that I can use in future. This is another mixed media piece that I've done. This, I got some Sai brush pens from a friend at work, this dragon, so I drew this, just freehand drew this and coloured it in. I used some yellow from an yellow Inktense pencil just to give a bit of background to it. Really quick, just an experiment. Here's another piece I've just done with stencils, not developed it any further. Again, it's just ideas for backgrounds. Here I am again with, let's see, I'm going to think now, gelatos, smeared in with my fingers. Cut out some fish and stuck them on there, and then I painted around the fish with this blue acrylic paint. And I used a stencil and some paste to make these bubbles at the top. Then I took the fish that I used on this side and stuck them over this side after putting a gelato background in, and then outlining all this little coral bit after the gelatos had dried with a black fine liner. More Inktense. This one, you've got Inktense here along with the Albrecht Dürer light coloured watercolor pencils, and it's very difficult to see, but this yellow background is actually twinkling H2Os, which are little paints that you can get in pots like this that you activate with water and then use them as watercolors, and they've got a mica in them that makes them shimmery. Bit hard to pick up on the camera. Here I've got a few stamps that I've used just with some ink and stamps that I bought from a craft shop. More playing around with washi tape and acrylic paints. Kleenex. I like the colours of the box, so I just used it in a silly little thing like this. More playing around. Playing with stamps and stencils. More acrylic fun. This again, I've taken a fine liner and drawn a picture. I think I was out at a restaurant having lunch with my husband when I drew the picture, and then I brought it home and grabbed out some paints and just filled in all the details with a quick colouring in to make it bright. Now I did this one, I was waiting for holidays to come up from work, so I just threw that together. As I said, a lot of this is introspective. This just playing around with some spray inks, some dabbers with acrylic paint in them, and some stamps, and then adding a few little details with flowers. Again, back more playing around with cheap paints. Another picture where I've drawn this one using a water-based fine liner, so it dissolves a little bit when I apply the watercolour to sort of muddy it up a little bit and give it a bit more shading and texture. This is one of the witches from Terry Pratchett's series of books, or my interpretation of her anyway. Okay, more watercolours I think, and some pattern paper that I've cut out. This, I can't quite remember what I used to do her face, but prior to drawing her face I already had all these splotches on here, and I thought that'd be an interesting background if I do the face over the top. And I like how this one turned out. That was fun. I think it's mostly done with paints, watercolour paints, just the cheap ones. And this is my little attempt at Kuri original dot art. Here I've made a shape and I've just coloured in the background a little bit, sort of used the actual focus of the picture and left it white and made the background colourful. These are all sort of ideas that I could develop later on. More fun, this was done in several stages. I think I threw down some prints of paint left over, paint on a stencil, and then I left that, and then I threw down something else I can't remember and I left that, and then I just went over the top with a black pencil to draw the tree, and then some gold gelatos to draw this sort of, not quite sure what that's supposed to be in the front, but I don't know, I was happy with that. I left it the way it was once I'd done that. I like to make lists sometimes and just decorate around the list, throw a bit of colour, make it look more interesting. This was a doodle that I just coloured in with some markers. And oh, this was fun. This was a picture that I started off, I just wanted to experiment with putting down the pastels the same way as I've shown you to do that for backgrounds, where you make pastel dust and you just rub it in. I wanted to try doing a gradient of colour, so I started with yellow, went through the greens, blue and then purple, and I left it for a while, and then I came back to it one day and thought, I wonder what would happen if I drew a picture over the top. So I got my polychromos pencils and I just sort of ad hoc designed this little foxy character looking into the water here. Thought the blue and the purple would do well for water. The green would be a nice band for, you know, the foliage, the grass, and then you've got the yellow for the sky. So that worked out well. I may develop that in future into a bigger picture. I may just leave it the way it is. Here is just another experiment with, I think I've gessoed the page beforehand. Gesso is a white sort of paint that you use to prepare a surface before you apply paint. Some of these pictures I've gessoed underneath and some of them I haven't. I think I was just experimenting to see what the paint would look like over the top of gesso. Now, These are some blank pages I haven't done anything with. Oh, and here I have the little witch girl. If you remember from my sketchbook where I was developing her, I actually drew and coloured her in the sketchbook and kind of cut her out and I stuck her on this background. So again, and I've used a few pieces of pattern craft paper and stuck it in. Again, as I said, it's all multimedia stuff, so I sort of throw it on and see what I like. Here's another background that I've made, but I haven't put anything on yet. I may do, or I may just leave it the way it is. This was, now what did I use for this? I think it was acrylic paint. I think I just started off throwing the acrylic paint anywhere and then deciding it looked like a dragon with flowers on it, so I did a dragon with flowers on it. This leftover paint from some project that I've just got a credit card, scraped off the last of the paint and just scraped it onto the page here. Again, leaving that, see what I do with it. I think that might be it. Yep, yeah, I've got a few more pages left to fill in there. And here is just an example of what I do when I get new art products and I just want to throw them down and have a little play and see what they do. So experimenting with dots there. Some odd little drawings and things. And oh, that was an experiment how different types of paint would react with different types of fine liners underneath. So I wanted to see which paints would be opaque, like here you can see it's sort of covered the fine liner, where down here with the twinkling H2Os it's pretty good. You can still see the fine liner fairly well underneath it. So another experiment. I think that'll do for our first look at my art journals. I've got quite a few others that I can show you. I've also got some art from my original work from my comic book series, both the comic book pages themselves and the design art and the poster art from it. I'll show you all those in later videos, but I think this is probably long enough for the first one. I hope you've enjoyed it, and until next time, happy colouring! Hope you're enjoying any colouring adventures that you are currently on, and until next time, happy colouring!